We have some breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. It's absolutely shocking. After 50 years of waiting, Universal Pictures officially released a true sequel to one of the greatest films ever made. And the breaking news is... it's shite. I should clarify, it's not shite for everybody, just movie fans. Happening, folks? Welcome to the channel. First things first, a small disclaimer in case this isn't your kind of video. This will be a spoiler-free review of The Exorcist Believer, but I have nothing scripted, I don't have an outline to follow, I'm just going to be saying a bunch of things that I think in no particular order. Think of it more like a therapy session for me to be able to get a few things off my chest before the weekend. Also, full disclosure on a couple of things, first of which being 1973's The Exorcist is probably my favorite film. Second, by default, I hate remakes and reimaginings and reboots. They all feel like cheap money grabs to me because that is what they are. Movies are art, and anything requiring a second or third version of itself ceases to be art, in my opinion. How ridiculous would it be to have a sequel hanging beside the Mona Lisa in the Louvre? Anyways, on the subject of sequels, with the complete exception of Exorcist 3, which although it isn't really an Exorcist movie, it is wildly entertaining in its own right, this Exorcist franchise, if you can call it that, has some of the worst, most boring sequels in film history. And we're not even going to acknowledge Exorcist 2. My review for that is linked down in the description. And finally, I will be addressing all the usual suspects in this review, meaning lighting, camera angle, cinematography. Because in this day and age, and you might have noticed this yourselves, the cinematography, the lighting, the camera angles, the costumes, the hair, the makeup, all that stuff has reached a standard. With all the money in movie production, you're expected to nail all the technical aspects at this point. So I don't feel it's necessary to list all those observations with this particular review, because the truth is, none of those things could have possibly distracted me from, well, without spoilers, ladies and gentlemen. Movie opens with an earthquake in Haiti, Port-au-Prince specifically. Leslie Odom Jr.'s character is forced into a Sophie's choice when he has to pick between saving the life of his wife or his infant daughter. And we cut ahead to her as a young teenager, and she is missing her mother, despite having grown up without even knowing her. She ends up sneaking out into the forest with her friend Catherine so they can do a little seance thing with some candles and a medallion. Then they vanish for 3 days. After the 3 days, they're found in somebody's barn and they have no memory of the time they've been away. Initially, they're fine, and gradually they start acting wacky, more specifically when they get inside a church, as you've probably seen in the trailer. Ann Dowd is in this movie as well, and I think she is absolutely brilliant as an actress. And in this movie, she's playing a medic. When things start going kooky with Leslie Odom Jr.'s daughter, Ann Dowd gives him a book. The book is written by Chris MacNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn. It's written as a detailed account of everything she went through as a mother during the Exorcist story in 1973. And this is exactly where they lose me. Right at the start. Spoiler free, keep it on track. Anybody who's seen The Exorcist would know Chris MacNeil, the famous movie star, valued her privacy and even more so the privacy of her young daughter. She would never have wanted any sort of publicity to arise from any of the events in the original film. Next, in this movie, her daughter Reagan is no longer speaking to her because she wrote this book. And again, this is fundamental to the original story's success. The mother-daughter pair were tight-knit and very close before any of the possession stuff even kicked off. So nothing so far lines up in any logical way with the source material. Next, when Leslie Odom Jr. ends up reading through the book, there's a section in it referencing the scene where the words "help me" appears across young Reagan's midsection, as symbolism for her being trapped inside a body she's no longer in control of. But if you watch the original movie, which you might assume director David Gordon Green would have, you would be fully aware that Chris MacNeil never even saw that happening. It was intentionally kept from her so as to not upset her. The second I heard they'd managed to coax Ellen Burstyn back into the fold, I jumped online, and evidently they delivered a boatload of cash to her house and then subsequently donated that cash to a scholarship program for budding actors. You know what I think? That is fucking classy. More power to her for doing it on her own terms. She's a very talented actress. Her performance in The Exorcist was the driving force behind that movie's success. Do you hear that, David Gordon Green? The power of The Exorcist has nothing to do with flashing images of Pazuzu's face on fridges. Bringing a 90-year-old Oscar-winning actress into your movie to trick fans of the original into watching your sequel is one thing. And yes, it did work on me. But then using that Oscar-winning actress to shovel exposition and a couple of awkward lengthy info dump speeches to the audience is a special kind of slimy. Spoiler-free. Not only is Ellen Burstyn's character barely in the movie 5 minutes, her character is inconsequential to the plot, beyond the immense weight her name added to the marketing campaign, obviously. Next. In horror terms, one of the greatest aspects of the original story and the concept of demonic possession as a whole is the randomness of it. Its lack of reasoning or justification or fairness. Regan and her family were put through a hellish ordeal without any explanation as to what was happening or why it was happening. None of it was ever explained, and that adds exponentially to the tragedy. But Exorcist Believer, on the other hand, decided to replicate every other shitty horror film in the last 10 years by explaining every notable event in the story in great detail, sometimes even to a scientific standard. So there's that. The character Chris MacNeil was the original powerless mother of a possessed child. She literally birthed the trope. Maybe not literally, but essentially she was a helpless spectator who was rarely even in the room when anything procedural was going on. And, I might add, both actual experts in the form of Father Damien Karras and Father Lancaster Marin died as a direct result of Regan's exorcism. Let me just repeat that. The two experts died. Two men trained, representing God directly, couldn't handle the situation. So introducing Chris MacNeil as anything other than a traumatized elderly woman with a head full of horrible memories is nothing short of tasteless. Which is almost exactly like introducing Sally Hardesty as a hardened Texas Ranger in the 2022 remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. David Blue Garcia. Anyways, as a world-renowned 90-year-old exorcism expert, Chris MacNeil has a go at her own exorcism in this movie, and... Spoiler-free. And from that point on, if you've ever seen a possession movie, like any possession movie, you already know, beat for beat, exactly how this movie turns out. Also, spoiler-free, they managed to bring the story to a close, I can't believe I'm about to say this, in a diverse and inclusive manner. Personally, I'm not a religious person, nor am I interested in anybody else's business, never mind their spirituality. But seriously, David Gordon Green, you sad little man, you couldn't allow a movie rooted in Roman Catholicism to stay that way? Also, there's literally dozens of scenes stolen from 1973's The Exorcist and replicated in this movie with new actors. And if you consider how adamant David Gordon Green was in making sure we all knew this was a sequel, maybe somebody could tell me why he decided to copy scenes directly from part 1 in the series, because I cannot get my head around that either. Anyways, to summarize this spoiler-free review as I look up at my 4x8 print of Linda Blair, Exorcist Believer was not scary. Doesn't feel like it's even associated with The Exorcist, never mind be its direct sequel. And that is even with Ellen Burstyn gracing the screen for 4 minutes and David Gordon Green literally replicating scenes from the original movie. He was handed another massive opportunity. Undeservedly, I might add, from a Halloween fan's perspective. This was his second chance to make his mark with a giant movie that comes with a pre-established giant fan base. Instead, he's done his own thing and turned an Oscar-winning, culturally significant, critically, artistically acclaimed, powerful, unique piece of film into another soulless, soon-to-be trilogy that would have made more sense going directly to whichever VOD platform decided to shoulder the burden of putting this piece of shit out for people. I am more annoyed than I thought I was. As always, I never tell any of you what to do, but I will say this. If we keep paying them to do this, they'll keep doing this. As it stands, the sequel to this sequel has already been announced. It's called Deceiver, and it's slotted for release in April of 2025. If David Gordon Green has been allowed to plow through Halloween and The Exorcist, that means he'll be able to do this with any movie he wants. All I'm saying, vote with your dollar. As always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this little rant, hit the like button and consider subscribing so you don't miss next week's video when I assure you I will be entertaining again. And until next time, folks.